Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and if you watched this video on the Honeybee channel, you'll notice a difference in the voiceover because for whatever reason, my Final Cut Pro editing program has been frustrating when I go to upload the video to my own channel. So I'm redoing the voiceover because the original one was lost. So I am using the new Honeybee Stamps Shine On stamp set. And it has this awesome nail polish bottle stamp in the set. And I'm starting with a couple pieces of black cardstock that were 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I just stamped the bottles and discovered I could get 4 bottles on each piece. So on the first piece, I used my anti-static powder tool. I stamped the bottles with Ink on 3's Juicy Embossing ink. And then I am using Tonic's Nouveau clear embossing powder. So I let my heat tool heat up for a little bit, and then I'm going to melt all of this embossing powder until it is smooth and glossy and melted. And when I started making these cards, my original intention was just to make a couple cards, but I had all this cardstock sitting in front of me. And then my mind started going and I was like, I wonder what these would look like in white. So I melted the first set and used the clear. And then I decided to stamp the images again on that second piece of paper and use Nuvo's white embossing powder. The whole idea behind all of these was I wanted to stamp everything on dark cardstock, and then I wanted to use the new Prima metallic pastel accents watercolor palette that I had shown in a haul video weeks ago. I have the first metallic accents palette. I've used it many times in many videos, and I ended up pulling that out and using that as well. And then this pastel one was released, and the great thing about these is they're very affordably priced compared to some of my other metallic palettes that are much more expensive. They're amazing, but they are a lot more expensive. This is a much more affordable price point. I actually just did a video the other day using one of my Fine Tech palettes, which is, again, it's beautiful, but it's expensive. So these are great. And the cool thing with this pastel accents one is I guess it'd be the far right here on the screen. Those are all interference colors, so they don't really look like much in the pan, and they won't look like much on light cardstock. But on dark cardstock, they glow. It's so much fun. I love interference colors for things like that. They're just very unassuming, and then you paint them onto black or just very dark cardstock, and the colors, they literally look like they're glowing. So I pulled out the regular metallic accents because of that kind of gunmetal black sort of a color on the bottom right of it. I thought that would look great for the lids of all these polished bottles. And then I just went to town just painting the bottles in all different colors from both palettes, sticking more to the actual colors, not the, the golds and whatnot. I wanted these to just be bright and fun. And that's kind of the cool thing with this polish bottle stamp is the sky's the limit. You can do kind of whatever you want because, nail polish comes in a bajillion different colors. So I just had fun painting this on. I've never had a problem painting these on. This is, again, just regular cardstock. This isn't watercolor paper or anything like that. I don't use a whole lot of water, and I don't really do any blending, so I've never had a problem with pilling or anything like that. You could probably go in and add a second coat. Like, these are fairly streaky. It's kind of to be expected just because of the nature of the product, because of, the metallic and shimmery pigments in them. But it didn't bother me, the streakiness or anything. And I mostly kind of went back and forth with it because normally a bottle of nail polish would kind of look like that anyway when you shake it up. So I just painted them all in. And then with these ones, I just did random colors. I had no idea really what I was going to do with them. I just wanted to paint the colors and see how they looked on the black cardstock. So I went along and really once I started getting into it, I started just painting the bottles themselves and then doing the lids last because then I didn't have to clean my brushes often between everything. And I used the kind of white sort of lighter color and I watered that one down a bit more. That's in the lower left of this palette, like the way it's on screen. I used that for the bottom of the bottles because, they're supposed to be glass bottles. So after I let everything dry, I'm going to use the coordinating wafer die set and I'm going to die cut all of those. But before I get to that, I decided, because I had more cardstock sitting in front of me, to stamp the bottles again, but this time just stamp full backgrounds, not the individual bottles. I wanted to use like full backgrounds with the bottle stamp kind of randomly. And I did the same thing. A couple of them I embossed in white, a couple I embossed in clear. I did 2 on black cardstock again, and then I did 2 on a dark gray cardstock because I was very curious as to how the colors would look on gray. And I like both. It's just a completely different look. So, and same thing. So, one of each I did in the white embossing powder, and then one I would do in the clear. So just fun experimenting. So I went along and just painted all of the bottles in all of the random various colors. No rhyme or reason to any of the colors. I just wanted it to be, because that's how I am with nail polish, the rare times I do it. Actually, funny thing is, as I'm like doing this voiceover, my toenails are drying. They're like bright neon pink. That's about the only thing I paint. You guys see me, my hands in all my videos. I don't paint my nails. I don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. But I love this set. I think it's the cutest thing ever. And it would also be really cute to do as like add cards and then to give a little gift of, you know, nail polish or something like that. I think that's just adorable. So the gray cardstock, I really liked how these colors looked on it. I don't know, they just seemed to pop even more than they did in the black, which is kind of surprising. So I especially liked it with the clear embossing. I don't know, that one just really stood out to me, and it was fun. So I did all of the lids in that same kind of gunmetal gray color just to keep the consistency. And I also did all of just the little bottoms of all those bottles with that little kind of white shimmery sort of a color, just to tie it all together and keep everything really simple. So I did all of that painting, and then again, because I'm not using a ton of water with this, because one, that helps to keep everything from pilling. It also helps prevent these from warping too much. And then that also means these dry very, very quickly. So I'm not having to, you know, sit and wait for these to dry forever. Because, of course, I wanted to add some splatter to these backgrounds. I didn't want to do it to the individual bottles. Those ones I'm going to die cut, like I said, and then I'm going to coat with some glossy accents. Or crystal glaze. Similar but different. So with these backgrounds, though, I wanted to add some splatter, because once they're all painted, everything's just kind of sitting there. It needs a bit of splatter. It needed something. So I went along after I filled in all of the bottles. I then went along and filled in all the lids. And I'm just using a like Nuvo cheapy brush here. You don't need a fancy brush to paint with these, because like I said, I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm not doing any blending or anything with heavy water or anything. I'm just mixing up that color. Another thing, I think I'd mentioned this in the original voiceover. You need to work these up with the brush. I, spray these pans with water. I'll get my brush wet. You need to work them up. And then as you're working, you'll notice the pigment will settle, and the shimmery parts of the pigment will literally settle in the pan. And you just mix it up with your brush. And as you go, and they're good. Even if you were to take the color like with the brush onto a separate palette or a block or anything like that, you'll notice very quickly the shimmery pigments will settle, and it gets that kind of, you can see it on the black one there, how it's got those dark areas. That's the pigment, like the shimmery pigment settling underneath that. So you just mix it up and it's good to go. So it's, again, just kind of the nature of these pigments. Sometimes they just won't look that great in the pans, but then when you mix them up, you get that shimmer going. So that's what I did with the kind of shimmery white in the original metallics palette. I mixed that up very heavy with the pigment and put it on an acrylic block. And then I'm just flicking my brush against the edge of that acrylic block and creating some splatter all over these backgrounds. So I did 4 backgrounds all together and did all the splatter after everything was dry, and again, let them dry. And while they were drying, this is when I'm going to die cut all of the individual bottles I had heat embossed and colored. So I just cut these apart quickly with my scissors, and I just used my little sidekick. Since I was doing so many die cuts, this made it go a lot quicker. So I'm just going to tape that coordinating little wafer die into place and then run these through my little sidekick machine until I have all 8 bottles die cut. And then after I had die cut them, or while I was die cutting them, in my head I was wondering, I was like, I wonder if I could add crystal glaze to the bottles to make them shiny. And at first I wasn't sure if that would work, because I was worried that the crystal glaze might reactivate that color and end up, smearing, creating a mess. It didn't. I think because these, just the nature of the metallic watercolor, they kind of create more of a bit of a solid surface is the easiest way to explain it. However, if you end up like scraping the nozzle of the crystal glaze bottle, which I did a couple times against them, it will like scrape the color away. So you just got to be careful. And I chose Crystal Glaze over Glossy Accents because the Crystal Glaze from Tonic is much thinner and comes out a lot faster. And I was doing 8 bottles of these. Like 8 nail polish bottles. I haven't made a dent in this bottle of Crystal Glaze. So this went a lot quicker. And something that someone left a comment on a video I did a while ago about this, and or it was about the Nouveau Drops, but a good rule of thumb is to do a little swatch when you're doing anything with like Crystal Glaze or Glossy Accents or Nouveau Drops. When you're applying it to your card, also apply it to a scrap of cardstock or whatever at the same time. Use that as your guide for being able to test when it's dry. And I will show this later on in the video. And it has saved me from poking at things that aren't dry and wrecking them, because I am so bad for that. So I've set everything aside to dry. And I am stamping sentiments from both the Shine On stamp set and the new Friends Like You stamp set. And I'm stamping them onto some more of the gray cardstock, and I'm doing it also on black cardstock. And I'm stamping it with that juicy embossing ink and heat embossing everything with white embossing powder. And then just trimming those down with my paper trimmer and creating sentiments for all of my backgrounds. And then I end up doing that as well for the cards I'm going to use the individual bottles on. And once those backgrounds were dry, I ended up die cutting them with the largest of the Honeybee A2 double stitched frames wafer dies. And then I backed those with different colors of bright cardstock just to really make everything pop just a little bit more. I just adhered those together with my Xyron Mega Runner, and then adhered those to white cardstock bases that were cut to 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2. So these will all be top folding A2 cards. So I'm doing my standard kind of mass production thing of doing everything at the same time. You know, I did all the heat embossing at the same time. I did all the coloring at the same time. I'm doing all the die cutting at the same time. And then now all the layering and adhering at the same time. It makes everything go a lot smoother, a lot quicker. And just, you know, you get kind of into mass production mode in a way. So after I got all of my card fronts assembled onto the card bases, I popped up all of the sentiments with foam tape. So adhered all of those into place. And then to finish off the insides of these cards, I am going to use that nail polish bottle again. And I decided to just ink up the nail polish bottle with just different colors of dye ink and just stamp them on the insides. I decided to keep the insides of these cards these ones anyway, with the backgrounds very simple, since I put in all the time and effort into coloring the outside. But you have to add something to the inside of my cards. I can't not. I can't finish a video, I can't finish a card until I finish the inside. So that's what I ended up doing, is stamping the bottles, and I would just ink up the stamp, and I was using similar colors of ink to the cardstock I used on the outside, and I would just ink up the stamp it, and then without re-inking the stamp, I would stamp it a second time on the inside of the card just to give that second generation, that lighter shade. So I would just go along, wipe off the stamp, ink it up with the second color of ink, stamp it on the second card base. Again, doing everything at the same time saves me the time and effort. So I got all 4 of these done. And then before I move on to the rest of the cards I ended up making, I pulled out a ton of Nouveau Drops. I've been obsessed with these lately. And it's just fun to be able to add a ton of different colors. So I pulled out a bunch in similar-ish colors to the colors I used to paint the bottles, and I sprinkled them liberally all over this. I was kind of thinking like, you know, drops of nail polish, really. So I put them everywhere on all of these backgrounds, and I would just do one card at a time, and then I would set these aside to dry. And I've, you know, gotten better at having, you know, a little space where my kids can't get at these, and where I'll just leave it alone. Nouveau Drops are technically supposed to dry for 24 hours until they're fully, completely dry. So again, this is where it's nice, where when you do this, squeeze some out onto a Post-it note or just a scrap of cardstock and keep that with everything else while it's drying. And then you can use that to check so that you're not poking at these and leaving dents or fingerprints or anything. And that's what I did here with the Crystal Glaze, especially because Crystal Glaze, it looks wet. That's the whole point of it. You know, it looks glossy, it looks wet. I thought these were still wet, and I'm glad I, squeezed out those swatches just to experiment with at the same time. Because then when I touched those, I was like, oh, it's all dry. It's all good. So I've got everything now. So all those bottles are coated and they're all glossy. So I took some black and white striped paper, my favorite MFT black and white straight paper, and I just added strips of that to white card bases, and I added just a narrow strip of the color cardstock, the same colors I used on the other 4 cards. And then I adhered 2 bottles together with my Mega Runner, and then I just added strips of foam tape to the back of them, popped those onto my card fronts, and then I added another heat embossed sentiment. And I did the same thing with these cards. I did the exact same thing on all 4 cards, just keeping it a little bit quicker and simpler. And these, you know, you could do up a ton of these. I can't remember if I mentioned in the other voiceover or not, but I used to own a nail salon. I'm actually professionally trained and certified esthetician. That's what I used to do in my real life. Before I ended up with 4 kids and on my own and yada, 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 long story there. But I would have loved to have this stamp set back when I owned my salon. This would have been so much fun. I would have made so many cards just, you know, give to my clients, etc. It was just funny when I saw this one come out. It was like, oh yeah, you know, I used to do that. So anyway, made all 4 cards, and then I lined up the card bases on my travel stamp platform. And then I added sentiments from the Friends Like You stamp set, and did all 4 card bases with that same sentiment that I inked up with Ink on 3's Blackout ink. Once all 4 were stamped, then I lined up the shinier sentiment from that set, and then stamped it with those same dye inks. So just a little fun addition. And I really like the Friends Like You set because there's also a sparklier sentiment, etc. I use shinier because I didn't actually add any glitter to these cards. But if I had done, you know, glitter polish bottles, I would have done the glittery sentiment. So, of course, I added a whole bunch of those Nouveau Drops to these ones as well, just to tie it all together, and did the exact same thing. Squeeze them on in various areas and various amounts, and then set these aside with all the other ones and let them completely dry overnight. And that's going to finish off all of these cards. So, as always, I will post a link below the video to my blog post. I will post a link to all of the supplies used. You can check that out in the description box below the video, and I will also have it all posted on my blog, and it's all picture links on my blog, so it's a lot easier to see everything. And yeah, these were a lot of fun to make. These metallic watercolors are just so much fun to play with. And like I said, they look way better on dark cardstock. Like on white, they just, especially the pastel ones and the interference ones, they just don't show up as nicely. So if you've got them, I highly recommend them if you don't have them. They're fun. And the Prima ones are definitely on the affordable scale, whereas some of my other ones are a little bit of a splurge. So as always, thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate the support, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye!